Welcome to another edition of the Bully Pulpit Show. Today our guest is a rock and roller, the lead singer of the punk rock band MxPx. Mike Herrera, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us about MxPx for our viewers who have not been to a punk rock show lately.
Well, MxPx is, we started in high school, just like most punkers probably do. MxPx stands for Magnified Plaid, and the main idea behind it was our first guitar player, Andy, had this shirt that was very big plaid. Very big plaid meaning magnified plaid, right? So we needed a name, had a show. We're like, all right, let's call ourselves Magnified Plaid after the shirt, because he would wear it like all the time. And after that, we were doing a flyer. Yuri, our drummer, was writing, instead of writing Magnified Plaid, he wrote it out. The first show was Magnified Plaid. Second show was like, man, that's too long. So we abbreviated it with X's, just MP with the X's. And we're like, oh, MxPx, that sounds better than MP. And people that, are friends, I wouldn't say our fans, because back then you don't really have fans, you have friends that come to your shows. And it stuck immediately with them, MxPx. And from Bremerton, Washington, started in 1992, and well, the rest is history, right?
So 92, 91, 92, Nirvana is happening. So many bands are breaking out of Seattle. How do you guys as a band relate to that emerging music scene? Were you a part of that? Were you counter that? What was going on at the time?
Well, I was in junior high at the time when Nirvana had, broken out with, I think,
Teen Spirit.
Yeah, Teen Spirit was their first hit. I remember hearing that on the radio actually and thinking that it was Metallica, because I had never heard the band before, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like poppy for Metallica, because the vocal was gruff, and there wasn't anything being played like it on the radio except maybe Metallica, or if it wasn't that, it was something, like I don't know. I mean, name a band, Van Halen or something, where you could tell what each band was. And I found out, oh, it's this new band Nirvana from Seattle. So I didn't even really know about them. Other kids, some of the kids that were really up on music, on mainstream music or whatever, knew about them a little bit, but I was a little late in the game. But as far as grunge in the Seattle scene, I did know about Mudhoney. There was a band called Flop. There was even some bands that would come over to Bremerton and play. And we were more into the punk rock. We were really into the Descendants and Black Flag, Circle Jerks, bands from California. And I think the main reason, everybody wonders why we didn't get into grunge from being up in the Northwest. And I think it was mainly because that scene was primarily for 21 and over. And by the time, these bands got big, then you could see them, but it's an arena, You could see Nirvana in an arena, Mudhoney, all that. So really punk rock was for the kids, and grunge was for like the 21 and over crowd. And then by the time it was big, then it's for everybody, it's mainstream, and it doesn't really matter. But that's the main reason I think we got into punk rather than grunge.
So the kids that couldn't get into the grunge shows are doing their own music.
Yeah.
At different clubs or skate parks or whatever. How influenced were you by punk rock in the 70s?
In the 70s, I was
I mean,
a little kid. Okay.
How influenced were you by 70s punk rock?
Right. It took me a little while. The first punk rock music I ever heard was like Suicidal Tendencies, more 80s style, thrash, skate rock. I was a skateboarder from 5th grade on, and but really, there wasn't really anything to grab onto. I had to sort of take music from my sister, my older cousin was into punk rock. The first tape I ever had was Stray Cats. So it was all these eclectic different bands. There wasn't one scene really that I was into. Because back then I didn't really know what a scene was. But I just remember hearing the Stray Cats. I got the tape from my mom, actually. And I just thought it was like really cool sounding rock and roll music. To me, it wasn't rockabilly. I didn't know what that was at the time, right? So I had all these like different musical influences. My sister, my cousin, even my parents. My mom would listen to The Police, Huey Lewis, a little more mainstream rock and roll stuff. But when I got into punk rock, that's when it all started clicking that, okay, it's not just these guys in an arena. I can actually be a part of this movement, or this, whatever this is, I can be a part of it. I started going to practices, watching local bands play in the basements of their houses. Down the street, I'd ride my bike after school. Guys that are a couple of years older than me doing stuff, along the same lines as like Bad Religion, Minutemen, Pennywise, that kind of fast melodic punk rock stuff. So once I started getting into that, the local scene in Bremerton, that opened my mind up to going, okay, I can start my own band. I can do this. And I I had a job at the time. I was working as a landscaper. I saved just enough money to put half of it towards a bass, and my mom put up the rest. And I got a pawn shop bass for $175. And I still have the bass today, and I just started dinking around on the thing and writing my own songs.
And your mom has always been a big part of your career. What has she been doing for you over the years?
She started out just encouraging me to do music, and when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, there was a few people I knew that played guitar and drums, and I was like, well, what should I do? Because I was kind of a singer. I was in choir in junior high. But I didn't have any musical ability or knowledge. So she encouraged me to try bass because, there's a lot of guitar players. So try the bass. Maybe you'll have more success or whatever, being more in demand, which was true because everybody I knew played guitar. Nobody played bass. And one of her, heartthrob idols was Sting in The Police. And so I grew up listening to their, greatest hits record and knew all the Sting songs, all the Police songs, everything they had done, So I picked up a bass, and man, those first few years were pretty brutal. Like if you actually heard any of the songs that I wrote, pretty embarrassing. But that's what punk rock is. It's kind of the everyman's musical movement, because you don't have to be good looking to play punk rock. You don't have to be a star. You don't have to be even that good of a player. It's really all about the attitude, and from where we came from, it was about having fun.
And how is that sort of everyman connected to Bremerton? Bremerton is a pretty working class town. Mm-hmm. Why was that a good place for this music to come out of?
Well, it's funny because, one of my favorite bands, huge influence on me, are the Descendants. They actually played Bremerton a few times before I even knew what punk rock was. I was a little kid probably, so I never got to go to those shows. But it's funny, like one of my favorite bands ever played my hometown, and all these connections as I got to know the guys from the band The Descendants and all, and some other guys in punk rock bands. I got to realize that some of the guys I knew that were a little bit older than me in the punk scene in Bremerton knew all these punk bands, were friends with them, had toured with them, played music with them. Scott Reynolds, the singer of All, he used to live in Bremerton. So it was just like so weird to find this weird connection with punk rock and Bremerton, and how all the pieces were fitting together in my musical sort of journey as a kid, discovering this music and this scene. So, there's my parents, have always been working class. My mom just stayed home with us. My dad got out of the Navy, and we just stayed there because Bremerton's a Navy town. Mainly, that's what brings all of the population there. There's a couple bases. There's a naval shipyard, and that's where my parents work, or my dad. The other guys, Tom and Yuri in the band, both their dads worked at the shipyard. So it's all like connected, you know. Tons of people I know from high school work at the shipyard now, and it's something akin to, like, say, you know, a steel mill, you know, on the East Coast or something.
You guys the biggest thing to ever come out of Bremerton?
I think so. I think we're pretty close.
What's that like, sort of going to the supermarket?
Some people would say it's sad that we're the best thing or biggest thing to come out of Bremerton, but we got the key to the city last year. We did a show, a charity show for the Housing Authority of Bremerton. Sort of campaigned to I don't know what exactly it all went to, but to help out with low-income housing in Bremerton and stuff like that. So in return, they gave us the key to the city.
So you go to the supermarket, you go get a video, everybody knows you, it's a small town?
It's not that small, no. I would say places I frequent, you know, people would know me, but I would say there's like 70,000 people. So it's not like a huge city, but it's not tiny either. Yeah, it was weird because as we sort of got signed and started touring, and we were playing all these local shows with anybody. We'd play with anybody. Back in those days, it was just like anybody else starting a band where you really just want to play. It doesn't matter who you're playing with. It doesn't matter where you're playing. It could be a church basement. It could be the community center. It could be backyards. Our first show was in my backyard. So we were hungry to just play for people. And I think that carried over into our work ethic, and, you know, seeing how hard people work, you know, how hard my dad would work, going to work every day. You know, we were never wealthy, but he always paid bills, you know. We always had enough money to, you know, make ends meet. So I thought I probably learned a lot from that. But at the same time, I didn't want to have that kind of life, you know. I did work a lot of odd jobs that any 14-year-old would work before you're allowed to pay taxes and work at a real place like McDonald's or whatever. But when I finally started working on the, you know, paying taxes and all that, I was washing dishes, I was being a busboy, pretty much in the restaurant industry all through high school while the band was going on. And I hated it. It was horrible. There were some good times, you know, fun times. Like Yuri, actually, I got Yuri a job at this place called Spiro's, a pizza place. And like one of the first days he was working, he actually ran into our boss and spilled his coffee all over him. Like, he's like, "Oh, who is this guy? Like, new guy." I was like, "I don't know." So there was some good times, like, and definitely I think working that job, you know, I got to know punk rock even more because we would sit back and wash dishes and listen to Pennywise, Bad Religion, Descendants, all these punk bands, you know. And then from there it was just MxPx all the way. That became my whole life.
Okay. Well, hold that thought. We'll come back in just a moment with our guest, Mike Herrera of MX. We are back on the Bully Pulpit Show with our guest, Mike Herrera of MxPx, and we're picking up the story right when MxPx gets signed to a Tooth and Nail Records. That was your first record deal, I think. What was that like? You're a small couple of guys playing music, and all of a sudden, you're a national recording artist.
Yeah, it was, I mean, that's all we really wanted. We wanted our own CD. You know, I wanted to be signed so bad that we would just make our own tapes. We would record a full album all the way through nonstop without stopping on cassette with a boombox in our practice room. So that was our album. And, you know, we made covers for them. And, you know, when we met Tooth and Nail people, Brandon and actually Aaron Sprinkle discovered us. He was playing in Port Orchard at a place. And
He's
we
a producer.
Opened for, yeah, he was a producer. Well, he was a kid at the time, you know. I think he was 18 and maybe 19 at the time. But his band Portal Lou were playing. We opened for him. And back then, you know, and he was a Christian, and Tooth and Nail was, I think they were a Christian label, or, you know, just an upstart Christian label. But I mean, they were going for more alternative music, you know, music that was modern and cutting edge. And we really, you know, our background, you know, we grew up going to youth group and going to church. I did, as well as Andy, our original guitar player. Yuri actually became a Christian about the same time as we started the band. It all sort of happened together. And Tom, when he joined the band, I think he had become a Christian like right around the same time he joined the band as well, our guitar player. So I think just in all of our sort of just us hanging out together, going to church, we all sort of had the same goals. And when we met Tooth and Nail, it was, it seemed like everything was falling into place, you know, from our perspective. We just we didn't know any other really, we didn't know that there was a Christian sort of scene or anything, because when you're a young band, you're just playing in your local music scene. You don't really think of things as national or international. I mean, that's even crazier.
You guys have always sort of bridged that gap. You've played, like you said, there's a small Christian music scene, but you also played on the Warped Tour. You've been out there. You don't really, I think you said once, it's like in high school, there's all these cliques, and we don't really belong to any clique. We play wherever, we play for all the cliques.
Yeah.
What has been the philosophy that guided the band that kept you from being locked into the Christian music world?
Well, I think because of how we started, playing with all these other bands, you know, some bands that, you know, clearly were the opposite of anything spiritual or Christian. We just kind of figured that's the way we should continue to do things, you know. We would play some churches, and even not all the bands that were playing the churches were Christians, you know. It was just where you could play. There were some coffee houses, we would play Christian coffee houses. And those were primarily very Christian shows. So we kind of did everything, you know. So we didn't really feel like we needed to, why change? Everything's working, everybody is okay with it. Nobody's yelling at us. I mean, we're just kids, you know, trying to kind of find our way in the world. So signing to Tooth and Nail was just another rung on the ladder, another huge step for us as a band, you know. The fact that they were Christian was a good thing to us. You know, it was like, oh, that's great, you know. That means we have, you know, similar ideas about things. And all the Christian bands we had met, so like Portal Lou, Soul Food, Don't Know, Blenderhead, they were all very much like older brothers to us. You know, they were a little bit older, and never said, this is what you got to do, or this is how you should do your shows. Never. They were always like, you guys are great, we love it. You know, it's really cool that you're doing fast punk rock, because those bands were a little slower, a little more alternative type music, and we were more skate punk. And there just wasn't a lot of that. You know, they're like, you ever heard of the Crucified? We're like, no, what's that? You know, so I got introduced to that stuff. And I think, you know, there was definitely sort of a gap in what was considered Christian music. There was a gap in the punk rock sort of genre of music. And the punk rock bands that were doing it weren't that great, or were just very, you know, all hardcore, screaming type punk rock or whatever. So we were kind of filling that Southern California pop punk sort of new style that was kind of emerging in the regular punk scene. I think that's a huge reason why we even got noticed, or why we're even still here today, is because nobody else was really doing it when we were doing it.
I think a lot of viewers will look at, think of the genre punk rock as not being sort of a religious or a spiritual place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you've got your tattoos, you got your various rings in various parts of your body. How do you explain that to somebody who doesn't know you? How you're kind of a walking contradiction in a way, or what the world thinks a contradiction is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different arguments. The most easy argument, biblically, is that we believe in the New Testament and the New Deal, the New Covenant, and that has nothing to do with most of those Old Testament rules. Because if you follow one, you got to follow them all, and that's ridiculous. So it really is the difference between being, an Orthodox Jew and being a Christian. There's nowhere, I don't think, in the New Testament that says you shouldn't have tattoos.
What about like the punk rock? We think of Sex Pistols and kind of people that are angry about something and they're going to sing about it. Does punk rock have to be angry? Do you have to be angry about something, or is that not an integral part of
Nowadays, you don't have to be angry to be punk rock, but it's just because punk rock's gotten so mainstream.
You don't seem like an angry person.
I'm not really an angry. I do get angry sometimes, usually in traffic, but no. But that's one thing that I've always really stood by in sort of what I believe a Christian should be, and I think a Christian should be real. And and I know that no matter what you believe, you get pissed off about things. You feel strongly about things. That's just the human conditions, human emotion. That's natural. I think that's all good. And I write songs when I'm really mad about something because I care that much. If you're mad about something, you care about it, right? Or you care about the issue. If you're happy about something, you write about it. So I think, when you're kind of just blah in the middle, how can you be interesting? You're either mad or you're happy, or sometimes you're mad and sometimes you're happy. I don't know. I'm both.
So it's not anger so much as passion. You have to be passionate about something.
Yeah.
To do good punk rock.
I think so. And I think you can be angry and be a Christian. Absolutely. I think it depends on what you're angry about, obviously. When I was growing up, was I frustrated with authority figures? Yes, absolutely. Did I have a lot of problems with so-called Christians trying to tell me what I should be doing and this is this and this? Yeah, I had a lot of problems with that, and I wrote a lot of songs about it. Some of which probably, I can just chalk up a lot of it to being young and I thought I knew everything, Nowadays, I still think I know everything.
So there was an attitude in the early MxPx records about authority. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, if you'll notice our first album on Tooth and Nail, Poking At Ya, it's very punk rock, sounds horrible. The songs are too long and, a lot could be changed about it, but the lyrics are very honest and raw, and just, the serrated edge, but they're not mad. They're not really mad. It's a little bit more like, hey, this is what I got, check it out. This is how I feel, check it out. This is what I'm going through, check it out. Our second album, Teenage Politics, well, some things happened, in the course of being a little bit more well-known, having letters come in, having people talk to us at shows, as we got a little, because that was our first sort of, introduction to the Christian scene, was Poking At Ya. And I think that's why Teenage Politics is so much more rebellious than the first album. Seems like it would be the other way around. Poking At Ya should be our first album, super rebellious. Okay, we're going to grow up a little bit. But it was the other way around. It was like we were just so naive and happy to be doing music. It was That was our first album. And then Teenage Politics was, wow, what just happened? You know, like I was so happy and I just got slapped in the face because we got so much negative feedback from, I don't know, haughty Christians, conservative Christians, or I don't even think that was even a term back then. It was more like legalistic Christians. Where as far as we know, we're awesome. We're doing great, you know, loving God, everything's cool, you know, and then slap, wow, you know, and I think we just weren't prepared for how cruel the world can be on all sides.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment on the Bully Pulpit Show with our guest, Mike Herrera.
You're off to such a hurry, girl. There's something chasing you. What has you spinning round in circles, little girl? Is it the world or is it you? There's no use trying to stop this. There's no use trying to make it go away before you disappear. Just give it time.
We're back on the Bully Pulpit Show. I'm Mark Joseph, and this is Mike Herrera of MxPx. Now, we talked about the MxPx era and what happened, but I wanted to ask you, we were kind of talking about some philosophy of the band's philosophy, but what is it like to be on the road with artists that really you have nothing in common with in a philosophical sense? I think you toured with Bad Religion. You've been with a lot of groups who I think are atheists, and yet you get along well with them, you hang out, you have a good time. There are a lot of people who would say you really shouldn't do that. You should stay, you know, be touring with other artists. What is that? What's the philosophy behind that?
Well, mainly I think, like I was saying before, is just be a real person. And I think if you're honest with people and with yourself, that's the best policy, you know, and you can't go wrong, you know. Even if you do something that is wrong, be honest about it, you know. I don't know, looking inward or not everything we do is like necessarily completely thought out, but when it comes
took
to
opportunities that came.
yeah, I mean, it was like, I don't know, I don't come from an area that's very heavily religious, I guess. So, I mean, I felt like I was more religious than everybody. And then I get out into the real world and go, whoa, I'm not very religious, you know. It just is what it is. People have different views or different, you know, spectrums of certain views. And I guess I'm a little bit more liberal when it comes to, I don't know, listening to non-Christian music. I mean, a lot of my influences came from just straight rock and roll. You know, Tom Petty, Elvis Costello, Descendants, all the punk bands I used to listen to, still do. But I don't know.
Is the punk rock scene, or your punk rock scene, is it like sort of the hair bands of the 80s? Do you have women throwing themselves at you, drugs everywhere backstage? Or
Right.
is it kind of a straight edge? Is it more of a, what's it like on the Warped Tour, for instance?
It's, you know, it's really not. It's pretty, it's not that bad. It really isn't. It's nothing like the 80s. I mean, that would have been, I don't know what I would have done if I would have had to deal with that, but but no, nothing like that. It's you know, people drink or have a beer, you know, nothing that's really that big of a deal. As far as drug use, you know, I've seen a little bit here and there over the years. But pretty mellow, you know. Punk rockers, you know, pretty much like their beer. You know, that's why they call them beer punks a lot of times, you know.
At the shows?
or you know, just in the more maybe in the local scenes or something, you know, beer punks. Mainly because punk rockers shouldn't have a lot of money. They shouldn't be able to afford anything but beer. That's, I think, the philosophy. So if you're really cool, you only drink the cheapest beer in the punk scene. So I mean, you know, as far as us though, I mean, we weren't even of age. You know, we don't really play bars. Every once in a while, we'll do a 21 and over show, and it's usually a special event or something where somebody that we owe a favor to really wants us to do the show or whatever. But for the most part, we're just always all ages places. But at the same time, we will play places that serve alcohol, even if it is all ages. Like if there's a separate bar or something. I mean, I don't really feel like it's our job to, like, I don't know, police that. I think it's I don't know. You know, if you're underage, you're not going to be near it anyway, and if you're overage, you're old enough to do whatever you want to do. It's your choice. But for the most part, we don't. When we play a bar, they don't sell very much alcohol at the bar. So
Except for some beer.
maybe some beer, but not much.
How do you think your music has affected kids' lives? You must get letters, emails, all kinds of reactions, for the good or good
Yeah.
or bad. What have you seen out there?
There's been so much good, you know, and it's always funny because when you get a letter, if it's good, you'll forget about it, but if it's bad, you always remember it. So there's been so many good letters from all different sorts of people from all over the world, parents, kids, young kids, even like, you know, I'm in 5th grade and I love you guys. A lot of, you know, suicide prevention letters, you know, people that really were about to kill themselves and got through it by listening to one of our albums over and over and over, and that's always pretty amazing, you know. And just you know, the good stuff is having influenced people musically, because music is so powerful. It really does stay with you so much more than, say, a TV show or a movie or a video game, you know. And you know, I don't know. It's something that you can sort of like they say, the soundtrack to your life. It really can get into who you are, and you can discover yourself through music, I think. I know I did, for sure. I can't discover myself through a video game, although it might be fun to play every now and then. But I mean, maybe that's different. Maybe that's my generation. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's pretty much across all generations.
So when you're writing, how does that affect you when you're writing a song? You're thinking of some kid in Cleveland who may be, you know, thinking of offing himself, and how does that impact the way you write?
Well, sometimes it hugely impacts everything I write, and sometimes I just write whatever it is, you know, without thinking about anything outside myself. But a good example of I think our fans impacting me writing a song is the new album Secret Weapon. The title track Secret Weapon is really for those listeners. It really is meant to be an encouraging song, a song that's like, I don't know, like a fight song, you know. Like,
And the line is, "You are your own secret weapon."
yeah. It's meant to like encourage somebody to like really get out there and not be afraid to just go for it. Whatever it is, go for it, you know, whatever you want to do with your life. Obviously, I'm not trying to encourage them to go for it, be a drug addict, or, you know, that's obviously implied that it's meant to be a positive message. So, but that was directly, you know, because I wanted to write a song that I would hope would have impact on our fans.
And what about the songwriting? Others in the band write? Do you write? Does it all?
Just me songwriting. You know, I've always told those guys, you know, if you write a song, bring it in. They just never have. And I'm not.
You're waiting for it to come.
Yeah. So, So far it's just been me, and I've co-written a few times with a couple other people in other bands, other songwriters. But just on one record, really. Almost every record's been just me.
And we worked together on The Passion of the Christ with Blink-182.
Yeah.
Have you worked with those guys over the years?
Yeah, I actually co-wrote a song with Mark for our Panic album called Wrecking Hotel Rooms. Basically, a funny song about me. I was in my hotel room writing this song, and I was just like, I feel like I just want to wreck this place. I'm so frustrated. So that's kind of where the song came from. But yeah, I mean, it's been cool to work with our friends, musical friends, I call them. Friends that we've toured with, bands we've toured with, played with over the years. So.
Okay, well, stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment for our final segment with Mike Herrera of MxPx. Welcome back to the Billy Pulpit Show. It's Mark Joseph with Mike Herrera from MxPx. And Mike, you've had a new band recently called Tumbledown, but you still have MxPx going on, but you're doing Tumbledown on the side. What kind of music is it, and what's that about?
Well, I kind of needed the other part of my brain to do something completely different from
The country part of your
punk
brain?
rock. Yeah. I wouldn't even call it country. I'd call it Americana. Because there's a little bit of folk, a little bit of country, a little bit of bluegrass, a little bit of rock and roll, and it's not slow, boring country. It's a little bit upbeat, kind of fast numbers. So, in a way, you could kind of call it punk rock country, in a weird way, but it's not really the '50s style like psychobilly or rockabilly. It's a little bit more traditional, I think. But yeah, I had been just writing all these songs, just tons of, eclectic type, acoustic sounding songs. And it's like, I can't be writing all these songs and not record them or not do anything with it. So I recorded some demos, got together a backing band. We recorded, and then I ended up, because I was doing all these country songs, I ended up writing for the new MxPx record, Secret Weapon, which is out now, but at the time I was like, how is it going to work with me being so focused on this other style of music and then going back to MxPx? But it actually made everything so much more fresh, maybe the word is fresher, but I don't know, everything was so much easier to write the songs for MxPx after working on the Tumbledown demos. So I think it's a good thing to kind of switch back and forth, to keep myself sort of, interested in what I'm doing musically. But I just recently did a tour with the band up and down the West Coast. We played Fullerton, played down here, and I don't know, we're gonna continue to do some small tours and put out a record, but MxPx is still gonna be around. And I've just got my hands in so many baskets right now.
Well, you got a clothing line.
Yeah, I'm doing a clothing line with a friend called Legionnaire Apparel. He's out of Oregon, and I live up in Washington State, so we're a little far apart, but we just kind of collaborate together on designs, and he does all the designs, hand screens them in his garage. So it's very, very punk rock, DIY, but it's been really fun. It's been another sort of creative outlet for me to just try something new, see what happens.
So what's a typical day like for you when you're not on the road? You're managing a rock band, which is a full-time business, sort of managing that enterprise. You've got a side band, you've got a t-shirt business. I mean, your day must just go on.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm building a new studio, a recording studio in Bremerton. We've got the Clubhouse, which is where we've done a couple MxPx albums, but it's just, we kind of grew out of it. It's too small. It's served us really well, but I just needed a little more space, and so I'm building a new one. So that's been absolutely insane. It really is stressful to do all this, but I kind of feel like, while I'm young, let's do it. Let's go for it.
Now, just between the two of us, nobody else is listening in. What is the money like for a rock star?
Right.
Is this just like, you know, people think, make a couple of records, you can retire, move to
Right.
the Bahamas, but I don't think it's really like that. What is
No.
it really like, and how do you earn money? How does a rock band really earn money? Where does it come from?
Live, definitely you earn money. Nowadays, with CD sales not doing that great overall, you know, hopefully something else replaces that eventually, but you know, bands aren't making very much money on record sales. It's mainly just touring, and even that, you know, you talk to a young band and they're like out on the road playing every night for a month, making nothing. They're losing money, you know. It's just really tough to be a musician. That's why it's really important, I think, if you're gonna do music, or try, to love it. You know, do it for the right reasons. Don't do it for the money, because, you know, we're not all making Motley Crue money, and they're not making it now either, I'm sure. So, you know, and that's also why I'm kind of trying to diversify what I'm doing. I'm also producing other bands, songwriting with other songwriters, none of which is really making me much money, but eventually that could roll into, you know, another type of a career in music, because that's all I know. I mean, if I don't do music, I'm at Taco Bell, you know.
Do you think, like, in 20, 30 years, you guys will be like the Rolling Stones? You'll be still playing at, you know, 55, 60 on the road, playing power punk, you know, punk rock?
I don't know. I'm going to say no. I don't think it'll last that long. I think we'll go crazy before that happens. But I would love to be doing some type of music. You know, I would play for 5 people if they're there to listen. I'll play. It's nice to have, you know, that love. You know, that's what keeps me going, the love of performing and doing music. I'm happy. I mean, I've invested a little bit of what I've made, you know. I think I've just tried to be a little bit responsible, but at the same time, a little bit careless, just to keep my life interesting. You know, because there's nothing more boring than a rich, content rock star, you know, because that's usually when the songs start getting blah. If there's nothing going on in your life, or if there's no struggle, if there's nothing you're struggling to attain, you know, if you're sitting poolside in your next to your mansion, what do you really have to write about except for the one, you know, song about you sitting by your pool?
A lot of hip hop guys pretend they're
Right.
in the inner city again.
Right. And I think they also pretend that they actually have all those cars and all that jewelry, you know, when a lot of it's just, it's a facade, really.
Now, are your fans today, do you think they're guys that have aged with you, or are they 14, 15, 16-year-olds who are just learning about MxPx?
I think we've got a little bit of a blanket. The problem with fans that have been around, you know, from day one, that most of them have families now. They still like the band. They just don't live and breathe MxPx, because that's what kids do. Kids live and breathe their favorite band. And adults like a band, but hey, man, I got to get up for work in the morning, and my kids, you know, I got to take them to school, and, you know, I just spent all this money on my kids' braces, so I can't buy the new record, you know. So it's all these life gets in the way of punk rock, as far as I've seen, you know. So we really have to get new people involved, new young kids.
What do you think the legacy of MxPx will be at the end of the day? What do you want it to be? How do you want to be remembered?
Hopefully just as a band that influenced a lot of newer bands, you know. I think that's kind of where we're headed, because we just played on the Warped Tour this year, 2007, and we did not all the dates, just a few. And all these bands, I didn't even know the bands. They're like new upcoming bands that are playing on the main stage, and Everybody loves them. They're like coming up to me going, man, I'm so glad you guys are on the tour. I just wanted to meet you. Love you guys. I, grew up listening to you. Now these people are in the bands that everybody else is listening to. So, that's pretty cool. Because, to me, that was the Descendants when we were on the Warped Tour in '97 for the first time, doing really well, huge buzz. And then I was going up to the Descendants guys and going, hey, I love you guys. I'm so glad to be playing with you. Same deal. It just goes around and around. Circle of life.
Mike, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Well, join us again next time for another edition of the Bully Pulpit Show. Until then, I'm Mark Joseph. We'll see you then.